Today I'm going to tell you all about my own experience having a prolapse. Before we get started, I want to make sure you know about all of the resources I have available about having a prolapse. This includes how to exercise with a prolapse, my free resource guide about having a prolapse, and then also I am offering a free workshop all about having a prolapse and exercising with a prolapse on Sunday, September 17th, 2023. This is happening in my Unlimited community. I'll have all the links below. If you've been here a while, you have heard me talk about my history with a prolapse. And I've talked to you a lot about how to exercise with a prolapse, how to live with a prolapse, surgery for prolapse, and all of those things. But I thought today I would just kind of put it all in one place and talk to you about my experience specifically. I know that having a diagnosis of a prolapse can be extremely frustrating, extremely scary, and extremely confusing. So by telling my own story, my goal is really to make sure that you know you are not alone and there is hope in living with a prolapse. When I was 35 years old, I gave birth to our first child, a daughter. I had really a completely normal pregnancy. I didn't have any issues. I didn't have any problems whatsoever. I also had no idea what a prolapse was, and I had been a physical therapist and a Pilates teacher for 15 years at that point. So that tells you how little we really talk about prolapse. But I went into labor, and after a very normal, wonderful pregnancy, I had a very hard labor and delivery. So I was in labor for 40 hours. I pushed for 4, and then they had to use a vacuum to actually get her out. So unbeknownst to me, those are all things that lead commonly to a prolapse. I did not know that at that point. What I did know was a week after being home, I went to check my stitches and my situation, and I saw something that shouldn't be there. And I went straight to Google, and this is the search term I put in. I put in pink golf ball hanging out of vagina. And so if you've been in that situation, I understand. That is what I put in, and it came out prolapse. And I said to my husband, I think I have a bladder prolapse. I called my OB, got in the next day. He said, yep, you sure do. You have a bladder prolapse. I could get you a pessary if that helps. You might want to see pelvic floor PT. You'll be fine. And he sent me on my way. I had to do my own research. I had to figure out what was going on. I truly did not know what a prolapse was. So a prolapse, if you're unsure, it's a pelvic organ prolapse. You can prolapse your bladder, you can prolapse your uterus, your rectum, and your cervix can also prolapse. Kind of the vaginal vault can prolapse in. So I was told I had a bladder prolapse, and that again was back in 2013. So for 7 years, I lived with a prolapse, and I had really only seen my OB at that point. And then I saw pelvic floor physical therapists to help me kind of figure out what was going on, to help me learn how to work my pelvic floor. I also really had to teach myself how to exercise safely with a prolapse. So during that time, I did a lot of trial and error because, as you know, if you've done any research, there's not a lot out there. And what is out there feels very scary, right? We're told, oh, you can never exercise again. You can never do this again. That isn't the case. I'm here right now to tell you that is absolutely not the case whatsoever. You can move, you can exercise, but yes, when you have an active prolapse, you might have to adjust it a little bit. So during those 7 years, I didn't run very much at all. I kind of stopped running. That wasn't comfortable. I lived with a bulge most of the time, almost all of the time. I tried a pessary. Some of you ask me about pessaries. I can tell you it's really a case-by-case basis. What a pessary does, if you're wondering, you can ask your doctor, ask your pelvic floor physical therapist, but a pessary is something that you insert into your vagina, and it is meant to help lift the pelvic floor wall and help support your prolapse. It does not heal it whatsoever. It does nothing to fix it. It just is there to help support you during the day. So it's up to you if that is something that feels good when it's in or not. It really didn't help me much whatsoever, but it can for some people, so you can ask about that. The things I definitely recommend you do right away are 1, see a pelvic floor physical therapist. for sure see a pelvic floor physical therapist. What they're going to do is they can do an internal exam. They can see if you are contracting your pelvic floor correctly. There's no point in going home and doing 100 Kegels a day if you're actually not doing them right. So they can help with that. They can help do some massage on your hips or on your low back. They can give you exercises. They're going to be on your team to help guide you. Okay, so that's the number one thing. The number two thing, if you are diagnosed with a prolapse, is to see a urogynecologist. So this is a big part of my story because for 7 years, I thought I just had a bladder prolapse because that's what my OB said. The pelvic floor physical therapist kind of agreed with that. And then 7 years into my prolapse, I had a second baby at that point. All right, so we had our son, we had a second baby at that point. I was 40 years old. And I decided I wanted to learn more about the surgery, all right? I had lived with a bulge that entire time. I was getting a little tired of it. I wanted to be able to just run with my kids at a playground. I wasn't asking to do a lot, but I wanted to be able to chase after them. I was 40, like I said. I have endometriosis, so I knew a hysterectomy might be in my future anyway. So I wanted to get more information at that point. Not sure where I wanted to go next, but I wanted more information. And so I saw a urogynecologist. That is who specializes in prolapse, all right? OBGYNs do not. They can give us a little information. The urogynecologist was the first one in 7 years who took measurements, who told me, not only do you have a bladder prolapse, you have a uterine prolapse and a rectal prolapse. I had no idea. They were able to tell me exactly what grade I was. I was grade 3, grade 4 prolapse at that point. That is who is going to give you more information. So I highly recommend, if you are diagnosed with a prolapse, seeing a urogynecologist because they can really, like I said, give you more specific information, which is helpful when it comes to making choices for yourself. So for me, I saw the urogynecologist. I saw 2 different ones for 2 different opinions. And I decided to have a surgery. I had a hysterectomy to remove my uterus because of the uterine prolapse. And then I had a major anterior repair and a posterior repair for the bladder and the rectal prolapse. And I had what's called a sacrocolpopexy, which is mesh that's attached from your sacrum to your cervix to lift it all up and help prevent it all from happening again. And that was 4 years ago that I had the surgery. I will tell you honestly, it is a hard surgery. I've had many, many surgeries and it was the hardest one I've been through. And also, I have never looked back. I have never regretted it one single time because I woke up from that surgery without a bulge. I thought that I'd live with a bulge my entire life. I woke up without one. So that seemed kind of miraculous to me. And again, it wasn't overnight. I still was peeing a lot during the day. I have videos about that. You can hear about that. I still had to retrain my bladder. I had to learn how to exercise again. It took a year for me to really feel strong again. I still work on it every single day. Yes, there is an incidence of recurrence after a surgery. So and it's about 15% is the general understanding that you could possibly have your prolapse come back. I don't think surgery is for everyone. I don't think everyone is a candidate. One thing to know, if you have a grade 1 or grade 2, generally that's accepted, that physical therapy can help a lot. And I tend, unless it's a very specific case, I don't have any clients that I recommend surgery for grade 1 and grade 2. That's something that can be managed. That's something that can be helped with physical therapy. When you get to grade 3 or grade 4, when you get to that bulge coming out all the time, many times the tissues have stretched so much, physical therapy isn't going to fix it to go back up. You can still manage it and live with it. I still had the option to live with it and it would have been fine, but I chose instead to have the surgery. So that has been my story. Again, did it fix it 100%? Not necessarily. I think I still have a grade 1 for sure. I still watch out for what's happening. I still manage it. But again, I haven't looked back when it comes to not having a bulge and being able to get some of my life back. So that has been my personal story with prolapse. So a few general takeaways I want you to have from this video. One is, like I said, there is hope with having a prolapse. It is not a prison sentence. You can still move. You can still exercise. You can still have sex. You can still be active. You can still be confident in your body. Yes, you will need to learn how to manage it. Sometimes that's through exercise, but I want you to keep in mind, do not be afraid of movement. Okay, that's the number 2 thing to take away from this. We can't be afraid to move. One, movement actually helps our body. Movement can help prevent a prolapse. So movement is very important. It also is important to keep our bones strong, to help our posture, to keep our balance. We need to train those things as we age. So we can't be afraid of movement. The key is to find movement that feels safe. We can still use weights. We can still use dumbbells. You might use them a little bit differently, but you absolutely can still use them if you find a safe way to do it. Another thing to take away from this is there are things to manage a prolapse that actually have nothing to do with exercise. It is even more important to be able to manage these lifestyle things than it is to worry about exercise. One thing is not letting yourself get constipated. That's actually one of the number 1 things you can do to help manage and prevent a prolapse. Don't let yourself get constipated. Don't sit on the toilet pushing a long time. Those things can actually really cause a prolapse. Things like deciding that you're not going to exercise all week, but then jumping into the garden and lifting huge bags of mulch or lifting furniture. Make sure that you do limit your lifting a little bit, but that you don't avoid it. So when I was active prolapse, I would work on lifting weights, but I didn't lift maybe more than 20 to 30 pounds. That was my limitation. And I have an entire prolapse safe workout program available. Again, I'll have the link below. But again, don't be afraid to move. It is important to learn how to move. It's important to learn how to squat. Every time you get on and off a toilet, you do a squat. So I want you to learn how to do it safely to protect your body so that you aren't worried about that prolapse coming back or getting worse. And then one more thing to keep in mind as you go forward is, again, there are purposeful and intentional steps that you can take to make the right decision for you. You don't have to jump right to surgery. You don't have to jump right to stopping all exercise that you love. You don't have to jump to those things. Gain information. See a pelvic floor physical therapist. See a urogynecologist. I'll have a link below. I do online sessions and consults as well if you just have a few questions about what to do next. But take steps, one thing at a time, to start to feel confident, to give yourself that freedom to say, I can still live my life, and figure out what things can be fixed along the way. Up to 50% of women will experience a prolapse at some point in their life. I am here to make sure you know you aren't alone, to take away all shame and embarrassment around having a prolapse, to open up the conversation, to make it feel more hopeful and more optimistic. Let's feel like a community in this. Let's make sure that we know we can continue to live a full life, and let's take some power and some control back over our own bodies. I wish you the very best, and I'll talk to you soon.